G'day, I'm Dave Pellowe, and today I'm sitting down with Dr. Ashraf and Christine Saleh. So Christine, tell me, what country are you from and how did you end up coming to Australia?
Well, I'm from Kenya. I was born and brought up in Kenya. I came to Australia when I was 20 years old. So essentially, I did all of my schooling in Kenya, kindergarten, primary school, high school, and then I did one semester of university at the University of Nairobi. And at that point, I got an opportunity to come to Australia to study at Wollongong University.
Brilliant. And how did you meet Ash?
We met at a mutual friend's party. This was just after the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games. So he and a friend that I knew from Wollongong University, and she was also an international student from Kenya. She and Ashraf had actually participated in the opening ceremony of the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games. They were part of the African float, so to speak, that formed the black ring of the Olympics.
Okay. Not racist at all.
No, not at all. And so after, I guess, they had 18 months of rehearsals.
Wow.
Leading up to that particular opening ceremony. And so they got to know each other and they'd become friends. And so after the function, after the Olympics, sometime after that, she had a party for her then boyfriend who had got Australian permanent residency. Mm-hmm. And so we met at that party.
Very good. And Ash, tell me about your childhood and ethnic background.
I grew up in Sydney. My parents were migrants from Egypt in the early 70s. They had moved for a better life, as most of them in the area had felt that things were going quite southward politically over there. So
yes.
Because of that, they decided to move to Australia, and Australia had opened its arms. They stepped straight onto the Australian soil and went into factory handwork.
Apparently, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
They got permanent residency the next day. So
I think it was pretty quick.
After they arrived or after they got work?
The next day.
When they arrived.
They arrived?
Yeah.
Wow. And did they come as political refugees or they just came as immigrants?
No, they were immigrants.
Right.
They were unskilled immigrants. And so my father led the way first. He came to the country first to see what it was like. He went home
but good
to
on
know
them for coming and getting a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there a welfare on offer when they came for immigrants?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. What was the government at the time? This is 1972. Yes,
I wasn't around.
No, neither was I. But at the time, both of them are hardworking people, and I don't think that would have been an option for them.
Great.
So they both stepped on the Kellogg's factory floor in Botany Bay.
Yeah.
And I worked there too. I followed my father's footsteps for a little while.
Wow.
Just before I finished high school.
Yep. And being Egyptian, I'm aware the major religions in Egypt are Coptic, Christian and Muslim.
Approximately 80% Muslim, 20% Coptic Christian. The Copts are decreasing in number, as you would expect, the level of persecution. But it's not just open persecution, it's the fine persecution that occurs under the table, under the radar. Yeah. So it's basically nepotism on a broad scale from the Islamic point of view.
Okay.
So if you're not seen to fit in, well then we'll just undermine you and you won't have the opportunities.
And your parents were Muslim?
They were Muslim, yeah, they still are Muslim today.
Okay. Now tell me what it was like when my understanding is that it wasn't exactly acceptable to your parents to bring home an African bride. Yeah,
so a couple of issues, of course. It's certainly the ethnic background, but more importantly the religion. Christine is Christian, and she came from a Christian home. Mm-hmm. All her family's Christian, essentially. And I had only just recently become Christian before I even met her. However, that was a journey in itself.
Was the word apostasy used when you gave up Islam?
In Arabic, yes. Yeah. It certainly was.
So that was pretty heated. What was that like for your relationship with your family?
Certainly strained. It's a deal breaker for my father, and it's very difficult for my mother to reconcile.
To this day?
To this day. Yeah, so my mother is in talking terms. My father does find it difficult to talk.
Oh.
But it's very hard because he's torn.
I feel so sorry for both of you.
It's hard, but I understand why. As much as it's difficult. Religion is much more important to them than anything else.
Because the average Australian won't understand why.
That's true.
You know, if a Christian, the average Christian in Australia decides not to become a Christian and become an atheist, there's no estrangement from the family. So why is it different for an Egyptian fundamental Muslim family?
Because Islam is their life. They cannot separate their life from Islam at all, which means if one of their children has broken away, then that child is to be ostracised, no longer to be considered part of the family.
What enabled you to think independently?
I believe that questioning my faith in Islam had been the first step in finding out what it is that we're here on earth for, because those answers are not really very clear in Islam, in the Quran. It's mentioned many times about what we're here for, but not why we're here. It's a bit different in the way that it's explained, but a lot of the Old Testament mentions of Moses and Jacob and Isaac and all of those Old Testament prophets have mentioned, but not in detail. So the Quran makes it very difficult for you to piece those things together, and you almost have to read between the lines to understand. But there is no clear definition as to why we're here. So a lot of the times I questioned what we were doing, and I couldn't get answers, and they were not in the scriptures. So then I turned away, looking for answers elsewhere.
Are the questions permitted?
Questions are permitted, but you have to get them from an imam or someone who's high up in the religious circles. Okay. And that's where I got them first, but they were never satisfying me. I just didn't quite get the answers that I was looking for.
Yeah. Now, you had a very close coincidence with the attacks on the Twin Towers on 9/11. Tell me about that briefly.
I was in the United States with a music tour group. That was about a week prior to the attacks. And I'd had a wonderful time there and got to know lots of good people. And I'd gone, beknownst to my parents, who I was staying with at the time, but not for that particular reason. In any case, I came back from the United States, and a week later, my father had the TV on about midnight, and I was woken by it. I stepped aside and looked at the screen and wondered what all this commotion was, where it was going. I had no idea where it was happening, what it was. So my dad was very quiet about it until the very end. The very next morning, he tries to reconcile it in his own mind, and he says, "You know what's happened? This is the act of God. This is what God has done to the American people." And he tried to explain it to me in his terms, and that was a clincher for me. That there was a turning point in terms of me trying to reconcile what it is that Islam stands for. And unfortunately, it wasn't for something positive. Although, you'll meet very many moderate Muslims who will decry that, it is not exactly against what the scripture says. So those acts were not necessarily away from what Quran teaches.
Do you think your dad would have reached a different conclusion if you had have been on that plane a week later when you actually did return?
It's hard for me to say yes to that. It's because my father, again, has a very strong faith, and the faith probably trumps my life. And as you would see in a lot of the circles in the Islamic world, those who are martyrs are praised. And so it would have been considered that way, possibly. I will never know.
What's it been like for you, essentially? Christine, I'm guessing you have no relationship with your husband's family.
No, actually, we do have a relationship with Ashraf's family. It took a while. Initially, there was the isolation, being separated, being cut off from the family. That lasted for a short time. And then there was some sort of reconciliation, but the reconciliation coincided with us. That was after 2 years of marriage or 1 year of marriage. The reconciliation coincided with us moving to Queensland for him to do further studies.
Further away from your parents?
From family in Sydney. Right. But we have a cautious but cordial relationship. We respect each other. We avoid talking about contentious issues, but we respect each other. We love each other. Right. But it has taken a lot of work. It certainly helped to have children. Because they were the first set of grandchildren for the entire family.
Very nice. Now, tell me about your views on, I guess, some of the hot button issues that you might have some qualified insights onto, either of you. Immigration, multiculturalism. Should we have certain priorities on who we invite to stay here permanently? Should we have certain restrictions or on, I guess, how many people we invite here to stay at our full expense and full cost? People who don't come here and start at the Kellogg's factory the next day. Share some of your thoughts on that.
I think I like to look at things, like to bring things down to the molecular level, which is the simple household level. This is what I mean. If it doesn't make sense within your family, within the household, which is the basic structure of a society, then it shouldn't make sense to be applied and to be rolled out within the local government or the state government or the national, federal government for that matter. And this is what I mean. If I am a visitor and invited to come and live in your house, what I will do is I will respect your rules. It is your house. I will try and not necessarily change myself, but I'll try and accommodate the rules that you have. I cannot come into your house and supplant your rules and overrule what you've set up, how your house is run. In the same manner, if we translate that into immigration, anyone who comes to a country or goes to another country or comes to Australia for that matter recognizes that it will not be the same as their home country. It will not be run the same. It will be a different culture. There will be different ways in which people think, in which people run the government. So it is important as someone coming into a country like myself to first of all, be thankful. It is important to be thankful. And secondly, to respect the host culture. In this regard, the incumbent cultures are the Aboriginal culture, which have looked after Australia for thousands and thousands of years, as well as the British and subsequent European people who've come into Australia and settled and worked hard and helped make Australia what it is. And that is the attraction for those of us that are coming from all these different parts of the country, of the world, rather. So, as an immigrant, it is my responsibility, or I take it upon myself, to respect the culture, to respect the people that have hosted us, have rolled out the carpet, opened up their home, or opened up the country for us. And it is up to me to see if I can make this work. How can I be an integral part of this society? How can I contribute to the society? How can I be a taxpayer in this society? So I believe that immigration should be a symbiotic relationship in which the people, the host culture, the host country benefits from the people who are coming in terms of cultural diversity and enrichment. But at the same time, the people who are coming in, the immigrants, need to be able to not only benefit in terms of getting a better education, better quality of life, better jobs, but they also are paying taxes and therefore increasing the wealth of being productive members of the society.
Yeah. And Dr. Ash, what do you think is the right balance or wisdom in approaching immigration in specific regards to Islamic majority countries?
I see immigration as, we can talk about numbers and we talk about the scientific way of looking at it, so you can go from one extreme to the other and say, well, we could have open borders and everyone can come in and do whatever they like and there's no rules. Clearly that's going to be a very dysfunctional system because it's not, people are not going to just abide by the rules of the
do whatever they
system.
like, you're talking about all behaviour is justified by the creed of multiculturalism.
Correct. Because you're multicultural, then you have that license.
Culture, it's a license to do whatever you want.
That's right. So that's where you can go from one extreme there. And of course, no one's really promoting that. But in many ways, there are aspects of that are attractive to one side of the political spectrum, and which then has to be broken down into the simple terms and say, well, this is the effect that you're expecting the country to go through, at the expense of someone else. So it's obviously going to be at an expense. It's not going to be available for everyone. It's going to be available at someone's expense. So you can go from there, you go to the other extreme where there's zero immigration and of course the stifling of the population and the effects that would have on the country. So of course there's a benefit to immigration, and there is also a detriment to excessive or illegitimate immigration, and we have to find the balance. And that balance has to be worked out both in terms of number as well as quality, and both have to be considered from my point of view.
How do you think Islam factors into the question of quality, the spectrum of cultures that are compatible with Australian laws and values?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because you've got the ideology, which is in many ways incompatible, but you have the people who adhere to the ideology. Many of them are compatible because they deny a lot of the things that are not compatible with the current Western civilization. So it then makes it very difficult. How do you then means test that, or how do you assess that before you then allow immigration to just be according to the number? So you might set a number, but then of that number, then how do you bring in people? I think we've got to limit immigration to those from those areas that are clearly adhering themselves to extremism. That is a word that's no longer being used because they don't want to use it. They don't want to believe that there is such a thing as an extremist. And unfortunately, the acts that are being done in some parts of the world, and many people are adhering to it, are affecting others. And that would be brought here. That's not what we're looking for. Not what.
Do you think there should be a limit on immigration for people? Let's say we want to take 100,000 people a year, or 50,000. Do you think there should be a percentage of that, perhaps a dominant percentage, a majority of that should be no welfare allowed or anticipated, and a smaller portion that's welfare anticipated, such as refugees, just out of pure compassion? They've got no other option. Syrian, Yazidi people, wherever that. Look, we're not bringing you here because of what you can contribute to Australia, but because we want to, I guess, carry our weight with the world community in providing you shelter from war and conflict and the danger. Do you think where do you think the right mix is in there? Do you think it should be indiscriminate, or?
Well, we have, of course, immigration is very separate to refugee or asylum seeking, and when we're talking about asylum seeking, these are the genuine cases that are currently being persecuted. And yes, we should be compassionate to all of those people. Every country, every sovereign country that doesn't have a problem with their own people needs to accommodate those who are suffering in the countries that have a problem with their own people. And so Australia must be included in that. Where we have the quotas, if there is such a thing, it makes it very difficult. I don't like quotas, because then it makes a moral judgment on certain types of people. On the other hand, there are those who are clearly heavily persecuted, and they're the priority. So it really comes down to the level of persecution. And you might be Muslim and you might be heavily persecuted. I'd like to see that kind of a person. But I can see very clearly that there are Christians in the world who are heavily persecuted, and we're ignoring them. And that's where I think our focus has shifted away from the people who really need it the most.
Yeah, awesome.
But what we need to put into perspective is, as much as there is compassion, there is also, we have to balance compassion with responsibility. For example, we cannot spend too much on bringing immigrants who we have to support. And someone mentioned that we spend about $100,000 per year per refugee. And that's well and good. Of course, we need to do that for those that absolutely need it. But we also need to think about the taxpayer and the burden of the taxpayer. So we need to obviously think about increasing the pool of those who are productive, those who are skilled, those who can actually contribute to the GDP, those who can contribute to the tax kitty, so that the country is not overburdened. Compassion is good, but compassion has to be balanced with responsibility, and that is fiscal responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for letting me get to know you a little bit and sharing your stories with my audience.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much,
for
Dave.
coming. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Pellowe Talk. Don't forget, at any time, channels like mine can be shut down by the big corporations such as YouTube and Facebook. So the best thing to do is to make sure you head to the website davepellowe.com and subscribe to the newsletter. So no matter what happens, I can stay in touch with you and you can not miss out. Where once a fortnight, once a month, I'll send you a newsletter and just keep you in touch. And if anything does happen, I'll be able to let you know where you can find me next time. Thanks to the partners and sponsors of Pellowe Talk, as always, from as little as $5 a month. You guys are just helping me keep bringing these kind of interviews and conversations directly to you. To make sure you never miss out on one, make sure you click on notification, like the page on Facebook, and follow every, see first is the type of notifications you want to get from Facebook. And when you subscribe to the YouTube channel, make sure you also click on the bell icon so you can be notified when there's a new video instead of just subscribing to the channel. Apparently that's not enough. But that's it for this episode. Look forward to seeing your comments and any questions in the chat beneath this video.